that's what connects me to the elders and stuff, is that it's something that they've done, it's something I'm going to do, it's something the next generation's going to do. It's just like a continuous, it's almost like if you're going to compare it to a basket itself, everything's interwoven together. Things happen for a reason, I believe. And there's a reason I learned how to do baskets. And there's a reason I'm teaching it. And there's a reason that Ramona and Lucille taught me.
Why they were making them, and that gives me a drive of why we're still making them today. It's for them. We'll try not to let that craft die.
As an artist, that's my living testimony to my people. As an artist, to be able to express the things I learned from my ancestors.
Before you even get started with the basket, you gotta go in the woods. Of course, that's with any of our crafts that we have. The thing that is very important about being a basket maker is we're probably the last craft that still goes out there and does this by hand. You can go out and buy beads at a bead store. You can go out and buy planks of wood and carve on it. You can buy clay at a clay store. We can't buy our splints anywhere. So we have to go out and source these materials ourselves. There's only 1 to 2% of liver cane left in the world, as opposed to white oak. Of course, there's a lot of white oak trees out there, but there's specific types that we go after. So when we're going out and gathering these things, we follow by the seasons, we follow by what the landscape looks like. Anytime I'm going out driving around anywhere, that's what I'm looking for. My eyes immediately searching for river cane, white oak, hickory, anything that I'm looking for out in the woods. So I'll drive usually about an hour out to Murphy, or sometimes I'll drive to Kentucky, to Tennessee, and I'll go and gather my cane.
My steps in my basket making process start from generally going out to gathering the river cane, which is just typically just going out to the river cane patch, cutting them, finding the right pieces, you'd say, to gather.
And then you have to harvest it, you have to cut it, you got to carry it out. And then once you get it back home, you've got to process it. You've got to cut your white oak, half, quarters, eighths, and then peel the growth rings apart to get your splints. And same with river cane. You go gather your cane, you bring it all back home, you got to wash it, you got to clean it, and then you've got to process it, which is kind of the same as white oak. You cut it in half, quarter it. If it's a big enough cane, maybe in eighths can get 8 splints out of a stick of cane. I start with my medium pieces first. You take your knife, you cut it into 4 sections, which is, you have to know what you're doing or you're going to cut yourself. 4 sections, bring it from the top all the way down to the bottom, slice it down. Then the next step is to bring one of those 4 pieces, work on it by itself, cut it down, peel it. As you're bringing it down, peeling it, you got to get past the joints. And there you got to have practice, because you can peel it, and when you get to the joint, and as you're getting ready to pull, you'll break it. So there's a pull and tug. It has to be even. That way you get past that joint. But you got to know how to pull and tug without breaking it. Then you get that long piece. Once you get enough practice and you get that long piece, and those are good for double weaves.
If you want to make a double weave, old traditional double weave, you're going to want them to be that length. But most of the time, we're going to end up cutting that in half. So I can average out around roughly 700 to about 1,400 splints out of all that cane that I've gathered. So after I've got them split out, for the first peel, I'll set them in some water, let them soak. And then once I get finished busting and peeling everything else, I'll go to what I've already had peeled and I'll start double peeling them. That saves me time from having to scrape them again. Because once you start scraping them down, it's almost like you've spent 5-10 minutes scraping it when you could just spend a minute or two peeling it again. Because when you peel it again, it's almost like 2 splints. But you can't use that inner part of the cane. You can, but you can only use it for mats, and that's what the older ones used to do with it, just so they wouldn't waste the material. I personally use the inner part of the cane to start my fires for my dye pots and things like that.
And then after I get through with the scraping process and trimming, then I go into the dye process, which would be going out, gathering our 3 natural dyes, There's multiple colors, but 3 is my maximum number of the colors that I like to use, which to me is evolving springtime, going out and gathering these natural berries, roots, and dyes, which the 3 that I use would be walnuts, butternuts, and using bloodroot, which bloodroot I go out and find that along the creeks and riverbanks, which is a little tiny plant, grows about 6 inches off the ground, little white flower. That's the best way that I know to look for it. Walnuts, I just gather those out of my backyard, my family's yards, along with the butternut trees as well. And those are 2 different colors I get to make my brown and my blacks with. And then the bloodroot I use to make my orange color with.
But then your dye, you've got to go harvest it too. Whether it's bloodroot, you go up the mountain, find a bloodroot patch and dig it. And the bloodroot's kind of, I think it gives different colors. Like when you dig it in the springtime, and then you dig it in the fall time, and you get kind of 2 different colors. Probably where it's growing to adds to that. Butternut, walnut, whether you're using the nut, the bark, the root, any part of it, you've got to go harvest that.
With the natural dyes, they don't fade. You can have a basket that's over 100 years old, and the colors are still just as rich as they were when they were first made. There, when you get your colors, that's the dyeing process on a color is anywhere from a week to 2 weeks, maybe 3 weeks. It depends on the individual, how dark and rich they want the color of their material.
Finally, after all that's done, talking about it feels just as long as doing the process, because there's just so much information that goes into it that you can't really put it into words. You have to be there and actually see it be done from start to finish to understand how it's going, because it's the most time-intensive, labor-intensive part of the whole thing. Like I said, it's 85% of the work, while the other 15% is the actual weaving. Now, a basket, that's about yay big single weave. I can get that done in a couple hours. I can weave that in a couple hours. A medium-sized one, a day. A large one, a day to 2 days. But I have a month to 3 months worth of time already invested in it. Anywhere between 12 to 16 hours a day invested in just making the material.
It's really hard to say how much time's involved in one basket. I can tell you how long it takes to weave it, but you got to incorporate all that time that it took to process your materials to get it to that point. And for that reason, it's really hard to answer the question, how long did it take to weave a basket? But I would estimate that you would have a good 2 or 3 weeks in one basket, depending on the size of it.
After it's been dyed and you've got everything ready to go, you just got to weave your basket for a single weave about 2 weeks, 2 weeks and a half, depending on the design of the basket also. If it's just, for me, if it's a traditional design, maybe a week and a half for a single weave basket. But a double weave will go, again, depend on the size, anywhere from 3 weeks up to 6 months. Depending on the design, depending on how big the basket is, whether it's got a lid on it or not.
A mat doesn't take too long. It just takes a lot of material. The basket depends on the height and the size on the baskets. And a double weave could take a month. And the dyeing process is 2 weeks also to a month. So we get
When I weave a basket, I sometimes have an idea of what I want to weave. And I will, depending on the length of the splints and the width of the splints and the thickness of the splint, whether it's going to be a big basket or a little basket, my handles, making my handles and having them ready. And I'll start weaving.
My mom once told me that anything you weave into a basket will mark that basket as yours, as our family style of basket weaving, because when you weave something, you put yourself in there. You weave yourself in there, how you're feeling. The design, how the design's making you feel. Your colors, how you lay out your colors. Even how you set up your foundation in your basket. That is you. You express yourself.
My mom and my grandma, because that's what they done for a living. And they told me someday that if I keep weaving and start, learn that basket, if I keep weaving, I could buy my own vehicle and stuff.
Throughout any craft that you do, baskets, pottery, we always have patterns that lead us back to our dark times in history. And, living with what we've went through our past, we're not going to get rid of it, nowadays. So I really do think that gives me that big of a connection that it makes me 10 times more proud to be able to sit here in a modern day, colonized point of view and, like you said, still be doing right by our ancestors, even like the pre-contact ones, because that's the way I look at all of these crafts is, our folks didn't go through what they suffered for us just to really give it up and for us to not care.
I was sitting there scraping splints, and something about just scraping the splints just was really relaxing to me. I really enjoyed it. And something about putting that basket together, watching something that basically comes from one form and totally transitioning it to a whole other form that's not only functional, but beautiful, valuable, and it's something uniquely you. You controlled that process from the beginning to the end. And there's nobody else but you that done that from the beginning to the end. There's no middleman, everything was you from the start to finish.
I continue to weave and make baskets just because I like to. I mean, it's work, but the end product is a piece of art. And actually, work never bothered me, and it still don't bother me. So I don't mind, and I enjoy going to the woods to get bloodroot, or going to the woods to get the white oak, or the cane patch. Being outside in it's just something that that I enjoy doing. So that part don't really feel like work to me. Now, busting white oak after you get it home and got to bust it and the axe slips and you pop yourself on the shin, well, that hurts. But, you learn to do it without hurting yourself.
Also figuring out that we had basket makers throughout my family line in history, that gave me that much more of a connection with basketry, just knowing that people inside my family line and generation were making these baskets. I feel like that kind of pulled me closer, say, to like my great grandmother. She was a white oak basket maker, and that also gave me that much more appreciation and connection to kind of have a way to be with her and talk to her, even though I never got a chance to meet her. It was just me doing these baskets kind of gives me that feel. And thinking that they're still there watching, like she's still, she's proud. Like I'm making, not even just my mom and dad proud, but my later on ancestors, making them proud. And I feel like that's kind of what helps me draw myself together, is just, like I said, doing it for your family and just knowing that was in your line, and to keep it going, that was my real, final straw.
It's almost like timestamps is the way I look at them. Because the way I'm feeling now, the things that happened to me a week ago, or the other day, or yesterday, as I'm weaving, I'm thinking about that. I'm thinking about things that's current to what's going on right now. And as I'm weaving these patterns, I'm starting to think of like Ramona and Lucille. What do they think about when they're weaving? Do they think about the same things? And then the fact that I'm doing the same patterns that somebody that's died, 30, 40, 50 years ago, I'm doing the same exact pattern that they did. And they probably are thinking the same thing as I was thinking. It's that connection of knowing that even though I've never met Eva Wolf a day in my life, I've done the same kind of pattern she done. I'm using that same rhythm and count that she's using and the same style she's using. And it's that connection of knowing that even though she's not here, I still have that connection to go to the co-op and look at her stuff and see it in there.
Myself, I'll call them story baskets. That's what I'll call my baskets, story baskets, because I do that. I do that exact same thing, and I learned that from my elders of the different tribes. Well, our traditional design here, I will include it in a new design that I'm weaving also. So I know the name of the design, so I'll place them to where there's a story in each basket, in each design of that one basket.
The fact that indigenous people figured things out like that, watching the animals and imitating what the animals were doing, I think that's the cultural, traditional piece that's missing from a lot of our lives now, in that a lot of the facts about us, we didn't learn in a history book or at school or anywhere, anything like that. It's not taught. For us to learn that, we have to have an interest and go seek and go find that information. And sometimes I think that is how baskets or pottery or pucker toes or our foods, how that connects us back to culture. It's the history of us, and that we have to go figure it out and find it ourselves. And so now it's up to us to share that with our young ones and our little ones. And maybe one day it'll be taught in the schools, or it'll be taught somewhere or another. But for now, we have to go seek it out ourselves.